What happens when you try to escape the Imperium? I thought freedom waited somewhere out in the endless void. I thought if I ran far enough, the Emperor's gaze would finally lose me. I was wrong. The galaxy offers no refuge from his shadow. I stole a ship and fled across star systems, only to learn that every world I reached was already claimed, dead, enslaved, or gnawed down to bone by powers far worse than the one I thought I'd escaped. Now I'm hunted by Imperial patrols, rogue traders, and Xenos alike. But the most terrifying hunter of all is the Imperium that lives inside my own mind. How do you run from what you've become? They never tell you what happens when you decide you no longer want his protection. My name is Ralph Vex. I was a guardsman of the 117th Cadian, a regiment with a history stretching back 12 generations. I held a lasgun before I could properly write my own name. I killed my first heretic at 14, a thin man with 3 eyes who begged for mercy in a language I didn't understand. I was commended for not hesitating. The colonel himself placed a hand on my shoulder and told me I'd done the Emperor's work. I believed him. I believed all of it. For far too long. Everything changed in the city of Varadim, a hive settlement on the eastern continent of Totricrelius Thivors. Population, approximately 3 million souls. We were deployed after reports of mutation and possible cult activity. Standard protocol. We'd done it a dozen times before. Sweep the underhives, find the deviants, burn the corruption, restore order. The commissar said it would take a week at most. We found them in the lower manufacturing district, 200 citizens hiding in maintenance tunnels beneath a factorium. Men and women, some with extra fingers, some with scaled patches of skin. One child whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark. They surrendered immediately. They had no weapons, no barricades, no resistance. Just silence of fear and the look people get when they've already been condemned. Containment protocols, the commissar announced over the vox. Prepare for purification. I expected arrests, interrogations, public executions perhaps, harsh but familiar. The Imperium always needed an example. What I did not expect was the order that came down from orbit 6 hours later. Exterminatus of High Varadim authorized. All forces withdraw to minimum safe distance. I still remember standing on a ridge 20 kilometers from the city limits, watching the firestorm descend from the belly of an Imperial cruiser hanging in the sky. The city burned so bright it left an afterimage on my retinas, an imprint I still see when I close my eyes. 3 million souls, 3 million Imperial citizens, loyal workers, tithe payers, people whose only crime was living too close to mutation, all reduced to ash because eradication was simpler than discernment. That night, while my regiment celebrated another victory for the Imperium, I made my decision. I would no longer be part of this madness. No longer would I kill in his name. No longer would I burn worlds for his glory. I would escape. I would find somewhere, anywhere, beyond his reach. I stole a maintenance uniform from the supply depot. I took a shuttle to the orbital station under the pretense of equipment retrieval. And there, amid the chaos of war preparations, I found my opening. A small freighter scheduled for departure to a neighboring system with a cargo of munitions. Its name was the Miser. Security was minimal. The pilot was drunk on victory and Amasek, slumped in a station bar with his credits spread like trophies. I waited until he passed out, then slipped aboard and hid myself in the cargo hold. Hours later, as the freighter broke orbit, I let myself breathe. A single moment of hope. I was free. Free of the Imperium. Free of his gaze. How naive I was. The Miser's navigation charts became my first lesson in the true scale of Imperial dominion. Every system within a month's journey was firmly under his control. Every habitable world bore the Aquila. There was nowhere to run, not in any direction that wouldn't eventually lead me back into his grasp. So I set a course for the void between systems, For the dark places between stars. I would find forgotten corners of the galaxy, spaces where even his light could not reach. I had enough supplies to last 6 months if I rationed carefully. The freighter's machine spirit was cooperative, almost eager once I learned the proper hymns of maintenance. I taught myself to read star charts, to taste warp currents through numbers and prayer, to thread treacherous routes between Imperial territories. I didn't understand then what I was really doing. In fleeing his reach, I was opening myself to the touch of far worse things. Things that wait in the darkness between worlds. Things that whisper to those who drift too far from the Emperor's light. But in those first weeks of freedom, I knew only the intoxication of choice. For the first time in my life, no commissar stood over my shoulder. No protocol dictated my waking hours. No prayers needed to be spoken unless I wished it. The silence was deafening. The freedom was terrifying. I found myself speaking aloud just to hear a human voice. I kept military discipline out of habit, making my cot with regulation corners, cleaning my stolen sidearm daily, though I had no one left to report to. And sometimes, in moments of stress, Imperial prayers rose unbidden to my lips, half-remembered fragments, conditioning so deep it lived in the bones. The Imperium was still inside me like a disease I couldn't purge. I had escaped its borders, but not its imprint. Not yet. My first destination was a small mining outpost designated X227. It orbited a dead star, far from established shipping lanes. The kind of place where questions were rarely asked, where a man might disappear. I docked the miser with minimal communication, claiming engine trouble and a need for supplies. The outpost hung in the void like a cluster of metal bubbles connected by transparent tubes. Through them, I could see figures moving like insects in a glass hive. When I cycled through the airlock, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Human sweat, machine oil, and unfamiliar spices. After months of recycled air, it was overwhelming. The second thing I noticed was the silence. 30 pairs of eyes turned to me at once, and in each of them I saw the same thing. Fear. Imperial. A gruff voice called from the back. An older man with augmetic eyes stepped forward, his hand resting casually near a holstered weapon. "No," I said, forcing the lie past my teeth. "Free trader, engine trouble." The tension didn't break. It tightened. I realized then that I still walked like a guardsman, still held myself with military bearing. The Imperium had marked me as surely as if I wore my uniform. "We don't want trouble here," the man said. "We pay our tithes. The administratum knows we exist." "I'm not here for tithes," I said, "or for trouble. Just repairs and supplies. I can pay." I held up a pouch of throne gelt. Another mistake. Their eyes fixed on the golden coins bearing his face, and I watched something harden in their expressions. "No Imperial currency?" the man said. "Draws the wrong kind of attention. You have anything else to trade?" I didn't. Everything I possessed was stolen from the Imperium. I was about to turn back, about to accept that even this fringe outpost would cast me out, when a voice spoke from my left. "I'll help him." She was tall, skin the color of burnished copper, eyes reflecting light strangely, as if the void had taught them different rules. Later, I would learn she was void-born, one who'd never known planetary gravity. Her name was Lysandra. "You'll vouch for him, Lys?" the older man asked. Suspicion sharpened. "I'll keep him out of trouble," she said with a shrug. "And I'll take whatever he can pay in Imperial coin. Been meaning to visit a proper forge world anyway." And just like that, I had my first tenuous alliance since desertion. Lysandra led me through twisting corridors to her workshop, a cluttered chamber filled with salvaged machinery and hand-drawn star charts. She studied the miser's engine schematics without asking why I was running. She didn't need to. "Everyone here is running from something," she said. "Mostly the Imperium. Some from worse things. Are there places truly beyond Imperial reach?" I asked. She laughed, harsh, humorless. "You really are fresh out, aren't you?" Her eyes glittered. "No, little soldier. There is nowhere the Imperium can't eventually reach if it decides you're worth the effort. But there are places where it hasn't bothered to look too hard. Places where the effort of conquest outweighs the reward. That's where I need to go, I said. Lysandra regarded me for a long moment. Those places have other dangers, she said quietly. Things the Imperium actually protects you from, whether you believe it or not. I didn't believe it then. I would learn. There's a system, she said at last, tracing a pattern across one of her charts. About 3 weeks from here, following the shadow of the halo stars. No official name, just a designation in old records. Cal 9173. 3 planets orbiting a yellow dwarf. The middle one might be habitable. No recorded Imperial presence for at least 4 centuries. Why? I asked. If it's habitable, because it's too close to the Veiled region. When she saw my blank expression, she sighed. Veil Nebula, strange warp currents, ships go missing. Imperial policy is to avoid it unless absolutely necessary. It sounded perfect. A place the Imperium deliberately avoided. A place where I might truly escape his gaze. Can you repair my ship to make the journey? I asked. I can, she said. But I won't. I stiffened. I never said it was stolen. Lysandra smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. You didn't need to. Everything about you screams deserter. The way you stand, the way you check exits, the regulation haircut growing out, and the fact you're piloting a munitions freighter with no idea how its warp engine actually works. My hand went to my sidearm. Her hand snapped out with inhuman speed and caught my wrist, her grip like a clamp. I don't care, she said, voice low. The Imperium's never done me favors. But if you want to reach CX-9173 alive, you need a better ship and a better pilot. Are you offering your services? I asked. For a price. She named it without blinking. Half of whatever cargo I was carrying, and passage as far as the system. After that, the ship would be mine. She'd find her own way back. It sounded too good to be true. Of course it was. But desperation makes fools of careful men, I agreed. We spent 3 days transferring essential supplies and components from the Miser to her vessel. A sleek, fast ship she called the Vesper Wind. Smaller than the freighter, but modified in ways I didn't recognize. Only later would I learn some of those modifications were Xenos in origin. Heretical technology that would have seen us both burned alive if discovered in Imperial space. By then, we were already far beyond the reach of patrols, following dark currents between stars toward my supposed freedom. The journey to CX-9173 was my first time truly witnessing void travel. On Imperial ships, the common crew rarely sees the transition. You're locked in your quarters, told to pray, told to wait, told not to think too hard about what's happening outside the walls. On the Vesper Wind, I watched. Through the viewport, reality tore open ahead of us, an impossible wound. Colors spilled into real space like luminescent blood, not belonging to any spectrum a human eye was meant to understand. Don't stare too long, Lysandra warned as she guided the ship through the breach. The warp looks back. I thought she meant it as a figure of speech. Then I heard the whispers. Faint voices at the edge of hearing, sliding through the hull like smoke. Words that felt almost familiar, but wrong, twisted, promising things I'd never admitted to wanting. I tore my gaze away, cold sweat beading on my skin. You feel them, Lysandra said. Not a question. What are they? The things that live between worlds, she replied, eyes locked on her controls. The things your Imperium burns entire planets to keep at bay. For the first time since Varadim, doubt flickered inside me. What if the Imperium's brutality had a purpose? What if the horrors I'd helped commit were necessary? No, I couldn't allow that thought to take root. To accept that logic would be to justify every crime, every innocent burned, every life sacrificed on the altar of his protection. The whispers grew louder as we traveled deeper into the shadow of the halo stars. Lysandra maintained course with tense concentration, making adjustments based on readings I couldn't interpret. Once, she ordered me to shut down all non-essential systems and remain absolutely silent for nearly 6 hours. We drifted through a region of space that looked empty to my eyes, but filled her with dread. "Patrol?" I asked when she finally allowed power to return. "Worse," she said, and wouldn't elaborate. On the 18th day, the Vesper wind shuddered violently as we dropped out of warp. Alarms wailed. Consoles flashed. Emergency lighting bled red across the bridge. Lysandra's hands flew over controls, her face gone tight and pale. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Something's wrong with the current," she said. "The warp is unstable here. Different from the charts." Outside the viewport was normal space again, a yellow star burning in the distance. We had arrived at CX-9173, but something was wrong. The ship's auspex displayed contradictory readings, some showing 3 planetary bodies as expected, others showing none. "That's impossible," Lysandra muttered. "A star system doesn't just change." But as we approached, the truth became undeniable. Where the charts showed 3 planets, we found only one, orbiting at the distance where the habitable world should have been. Of the other 2, there was no sign. "Could the charts be wrong?" I asked. Lysandra shook her head. "Rogue trader charts, expensive, accurate." She ran another scan, frowning harder. "And the composition is all wrong. I've never seen readings like this." As we established orbit, I got my first view of what was supposed to be my sanctuary. The planet below was gray-brown, dead-looking at first glance, but its surface was etched with patterns that seemed deliberate. Vast geometric lines like circuit diagrams or arcane sigils carved across continents. No oceans, no green, no life that I could see. Just endless design. "Is it dead?" I asked. "No," Lysandra whispered. "It's awake." Before I could ask what she meant, the Vox activated on its own. A sound poured into the bridge that was not quite language and not quite machine code, rhythmic tones and static that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Lysandra moved with sudden urgency, slamming emergency thruster controls. The Vesper wind lurched away from the planet. "What are you doing?" I shouted, gripping a rail as the deck bucked. "Getting us out of here," she snapped, fear cracking through her voice. "Why, the planet?" "The planet is not a planet," she cut me off. "It's a tomb, a Necron tomb world." The word meant nothing to me then. As a common guardsman, I'd been taught the usual enemies, orcs, Eldar, the forces of chaos. The ancient race of living metal sleeping beneath countless worlds was knowledge deemed too dangerous for ordinary soldiers. I would learn soon enough. As the Vesper wind accelerated, the Vox continued to emit that terrible knotted sound. Then the planet moved. A section of its surface shifted, enormous panels sliding apart like the opening of a colossal vault. Beneath, a chasm of green light yawned into existence. Lysandra stared, all her practiced disdain for the Imperium burned away by raw terror. "Throne," she breathed. From the chasm, something rose, a vessel of impossible design. Sharp angles, cold symmetry, glowing glyphs, moving with a grace that mocked its apparent mass. It emerged slowly, deliberately, as if time itself belonged to it. It oriented toward us. "Can we outrun it?" I asked, voice thin. "No one outruns the Necrons," Lysandra said, but she pushed the engines harder anyway. "Our only hope is to reach the warp before they decide we're worth the effort." The Necron vessel decided. A beam of viridian energy lanced out and struck our port side. Systems died instantly. Gravity fluctuated. My stomach rose as we floated for a heartbeat, then slammed back into the deck as the ship shuddered. "Warp engine is offline," Lysandra reported, fingers flying across failing controls. "We can't jump. Can we fight?" I asked, hand on my sidearm, as if a guardsman's pistol could matter against a Xenos warship. Lysandra laughed, not with humor, with hysteria. "Fight the Necrons with what?" Harsh language. Another beam hit us, more precise this time. A strange sensation crawled through my body, as if my atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled incorrectly. The metal around us shimmered, blurred, as though the ship itself was forgetting what shape it was supposed to be. "Teleportation beam," Lysandra gasped. They're taking us. The last thing I remember before darkness claimed me was the sight of gleaming metal figures materializing on the bridge, silent, flawless, inevitable. Skeletal forms with eyes of burning emerald fire moved through the bridge, slowly, patiently, like predators that already knew their prey could not escape. As my vision tunneled toward black, I thought I saw the Imperial Aquila burning in the void beyond the viewport, watching, judging. The Emperor protects, the old prayer goes. But who protects those who flee his protection? I woke to perfect darkness and the sensation of metal against my back, not the familiar plating of a ship's deck. This was colder, more exact, as if every molecule had been placed by alien design. I tried to move. Nothing. No straps, no chains, no pressure on my wrists or throat, yet some unseen force held me perfectly still. My breathing was the only sound, echoing softly as if I lay in a vast chamber that refused to reveal its boundaries. Then the light came. Not flame, not harsh imperial lumens. A cold green radiance that seemed to bleed from the metal itself. It washed over the chamber and made my mind recoil. Angles that met wrong, distances that lied, lines that suggested a geometry not meant for human eyes. The walls were covered in the same circuit-like patterns I'd seen on the planet's surface. Only here they pulsed, alive with power, as if the entire structure was a machine that could think. Before me stood one of the figures I'd glimpsed at the end. Up close it was worse, a skeleton rendered in living metal. Tall, thin, subtly incorrect. Its skull face held a fixed, amused grin. Emerald eyes burned with something that felt less like hatred and more like curiosity. Where was Lysandra? What had happened to the ship? I tried to speak. My mouth wouldn't obey. I could only watch as it lifted a device in its hand. It spoke, yet not in words. The sound bypassed my ears entirely. A sequence of clicks and electronic tones that resonated directly inside my skull. I didn't understand the language, but I understood the meaning anyway, like a thought implanted whole. Subject acquired. Analysis proceeding. The device activated. A sheet of green light swept over me from head to foot. I felt no pain, nothing physical at all, yet a deep sense of violation crawled through me, as if it wasn't reading my flesh so much as cataloging me. Measuring not just bone and blood, but memory, instinct, identity. Even the parts of a man he tells himself aren't real. More of them entered, silent, perfectly coordinated, their steps making no sound. They conferred in that clicking language, turning their burning gaze on me as if I were an artifact pulled from a ruin. And then they began to change. Their bodies flowed like liquid metal, reforming into shapes that were unmistakably human, crude, imperfect approximations. Their proportions still wrong, their movements still too precise, too deliberate. One of them chose me. It molded its face into a grotesque parody of my own, a mirror that didn't reflect. It mocked. It approached with a stuttering imitation of a human gait and reached out. Fingers too long, too jointed touched my cheek. The cold wasn't merely temperature, it felt like a concept, a declaration. Guardsman Ralv Vex. It said, in my own voice, my cadence, my tone, yet utterly stripped of humanity. Deserter, traitor to your Imperium. My blood turned to ice. They had taken my memories, my knowledge, my name. You seek escape, the thing continued. There is no escape, only transition. It turned to its companions and clicked rapidly. Their responses came in perfect rhythm, like a choir reciting a litany. Your biological form is inefficient, my double said. We will improve it. You will serve the awakening. Service. Always service. I had fled the Imperium to stop being a tool, only to be claimed by something infinitely older, something that didn't even pretend to care. With a gesture from the one wearing my face, The field holding me released. My body dropped as if my bones had forgotten their purpose. I hit the metal floor hard, limbs numb, mind screaming in a skull that refused to shout. Skeletal hands seized me and lifted me as effortlessly as if I weighed nothing. They carried me deeper into the structure. Corridors folded strangely, repeating patterns that felt identical until I realized they weren't. My eyes just couldn't measure the difference. We passed chambers where Necrons worked at tasks I couldn't comprehend. Movements too exact to be labor, too calm to be urgency. In some rooms I saw other organic beings suspended in shimmering fields. Not all of them human. Shapes held half between motion and stillness as Necrons studied them with remorseless interest, opening, testing, replacing, reassembling with the detached precision of craftsmen. Then I saw her, Lysandra. Her void-born physiology had made her interesting. She was held in a lattice of green light while Necrons worked around her with tools that didn't look like tools, more like ideas made solid. She was altered, segmented, integrated into their alien apparatus. Her eyes, those strange reflective orbs, were isolated within a containment field, still moving, still tracking. She was conscious, aware, and helpless. Something inside me snapped. I struggled, an animal surge of terror and rage, enough to make my captors adjust their grip. It made no difference. The metal hands tightened with a warning pressure that promised crushed bone if I persisted. I went still, because survival is a reflex even when dignity is dead. They brought me to a chamber dominated by a platform of black stone veined with glowing green energy. Above it hung an apparatus that made my mind slide away from understanding. Blades too thin to be real, containers of swirling metallic fluid, crystalline structures that seemed half-present, as if part of them existed somewhere else. My doppelganger directed them to place me on the platform. The stone drank heat from my skin like a living thing. Restraints of energy formed instantly, binding me in place. "Your Imperium sought to shape you into a weapon," it said. "We will complete the process. Flesh will surrender to necrodermis. Consciousness will merge with command protocol. You will become perfection." I would rather die, I managed, finding my voice at last, thin and cracked. Its expression shifted slightly as if attempting a smile. Death is a concept we transcended eons ago. There is only transformation. The apparatus above me hummed to life. Blades descended. I closed my eyes. Then the chamber shook. A sound like thunder rolled through the structure. The Necrons turned as one, emerald eyes snapping toward the disturbance. Their clicking language became rapid, urgent. The blades retracted slightly. The restraints didn't fail, but the air itself felt different, charged, unstable. My doppelganger touched a wall. It transformed into a viewing portal. Beyond it, space. And Imperial ships. Not just any ships, the unmistakable silhouette of an inquisitorial black ship with escort vessels. They had found me. Whether they'd tracked the Vesper wind or simply detected a tomb world awakening, the result was the same. The Imperium had arrived. My double turned back to me. "Your Imperium comes. Not for you. For us." It gestured. 2 Necrons moved to continue the procedure. Then another explosion hit. Closer, more violent. Lights flickered. Systems stuttered. For one heartbeat, the restraints weakened. It was enough. Years of combat training took over before thought could interfere. I rolled, tore myself off the platform, hit the floor hard. Blood roared in my ears as circulation returned to numb limbs like knives under the skin. I scrambled beneath the platform as Necrons shifted to recapture me. Another impact. Bigger. Emergency protocols rippled through the structure. The green light deepened to a harsher emerald, as if the tomb itself had entered a different state of wakefulness. The Necron's attention fractured, half toward the attack, half toward internal procedure. My doppelganger spoke again, this time not to me but to them. "Threat assessment indicates inquisitorial forces. Activation sequence compromised. Initiate emergency stasis protocol. Instantly, the others ceased pursuit and moved with purpose toward defensive positions. The procedure was abandoned like a tool set down mid-cut. My double lingered, its burning gaze fixed on me beneath the platform. "The Imperium will not save you, deserter," it said. "They will burn you with us. If not today, then when they find you next. The galaxy offers no sanctuary for defiance." Then it departed, moving with inhuman speed deeper into the tomb. For a moment, I was alone, forgotten in the chaos. I had only a narrow window before the Necrons remembered I existed, or the Inquisition reduced this entire section to molten ruin. I forced my trembling legs to work and staggered into the corridor. The tomb was in disarray, not chaos, not panic, but rapid, purposeful motion. Necron warriors moved past me toward defensive points. None spared me a glance. A single human was irrelevant beside an Imperial threat. I ran. No plan, no map, no destination, only the desperate instinct to flee away from both the soulless Xenos and the equally merciless Imperium. Corridors repeated, alien geometries twisting my sense of direction until left and right felt like guesses. By chance or fate, I found a docking bay. The architecture opened toward the void, held back by energy fields that contained atmosphere while permitting ships to pass. Several smaller Necron craft rested on platforms, their designs as incomprehensible as everything else. Through the energy field, I saw the battle. Imperial lance batteries carving clean lines through portions of the tomb structure, surgical and merciless. Necron vessels rising from the planet's surface, waking weapons that answered with viridian beams that simply erased whatever they touched. Neither side cared about one deserting guardsman. I was less than nothing in a war older than my species. One smaller vessel sat closer than the others, a crescent shape of living metal, large enough to carry perhaps a dozen Necron warriors. No visible entrance, no controls I recognized. But as I approached, hesitant, desperate, the hull flowed like water and formed an opening just large enough for a human to enter. It was inviting me in. Every scrap of Imperial conditioning screamed heresy. To let Xenos technology close around me willingly was corruption beyond measure. Another explosion rocked the structure. Through the field, I saw an Imperial escort ship split apart under concentrated Necron fire, crew exposed to void in an instant of silent horror. I had no choice. Death by Imperial execution. Death by Necron improvement. Death in the crossfire. Or the slim chance offered by this alien craft that opened for me like a mouth. I stepped inside. The opening sealed behind me. Metal flowed together as if it had never been there. The interior was a single chamber bathed in cold green light. No seats, no harnesses. No interfaces. "How do I started aloud. The floor shifted. Metal rose and formed a platform beneath my feet, lifting me to the center. More metal flowed upward, shaping into a cradle that enclosed me. Not crushing, not painful, but absolute. It held me like an insect pinned for study. The craft knew what I wanted, or it was simply obeying a protocol older than reason. It disengaged from its dock and drifted toward the energy field. We passed through, and suddenly we were in space, accelerating away from the tomb world and the battle surrounding it. Somehow, the craft showed me the outside as if the hull had become transparent from within, while remaining solid from without. I watched Imperial and Necron ships shrink behind us. Neither force noticed or cared that one small vessel had fled. The tomb world receded, its surface now alive with green fire. Fully awake. For the second time I had escaped. First from the Imperium I swore to serve. Then from the Xenos horror that nearly remade me. But this time, my vessel of escape was itself Xenos technology of the highest order. I had traded one damnation for another, and I still didn't know where the craft was taking me or how to control it. Then I felt a change. The cradle began to integrate. Tendrils of liquid metal extended across my limbs. paper-thin filaments spreading like a web over my skin. I tried to pull away. The cradle held me without strain, irresistible. The filaments advanced. Some slipped beneath my skin without breaking it, so fine it felt like cold smoke finding cracks in stone, a sensation like ice water moving through my veins. No, I breathed, understanding arriving too late. This craft wasn't merely transport. It was a mechanism of transformation, an extension of the tomb's will, meant to remake its occupant as surely as the platform would have. Yet something was different. There was no agony, no ripping, no brutal violation. Instead, awareness. New senses unfolded like a second set of eyes opening inside my mind. I could feel the ship around me, not as a separate object, but as an extension of myself. Systems that had been incomprehensible moments before now carried meaning and patterns my brain couldn't name, but could somehow use. This wasn't a warship. It wasn't even a transport. It was a seed, a probe, sent out from an awakening tomb world to observe, record, and find suitable locations for expansion, then return with its findings. Its guiding consciousness was meant to be Necron, not human. My organic mind didn't fit cleanly into its command structure. I could influence our course, but not fully control it. I could perceive through its senses, but the information arrived in alien shapes, forcing my thoughts to translate what they were never built to understand. We accelerated away from CX-9Y on a trajectory that plunged deeper into what Lysandra had called the Veiled Nebula, Kunad. The craft knew paths through warp currents no Imperial navigator would dare to follow, regions where reality thinned, where the borders between dimensions wavered like heat haze. I should have been terrified. I should have fought the integration, tried to claw my humanity back into the driver's seat. But a strange calm settled over me. The part of me that was still Ralva Vex, still human, felt like it was receding, watching from behind a pane of glass as something new assembled itself in the interface between my mind and the ship's will. Not Necron, not human, something between. And then, through the ship's senses, I became aware of pursuit. Not from the battle behind us. Imperial and Necron forces remained locked together. This was something else. A sleek vessel of elegant design moving through the void with impossible grace. Eldar, ancient enemies of mankind and Necron alike, organic, psychic, and armed with technology that made even the mighty Imperium feel crude. Their ship was small, likely a scout, but it followed with clear intent, matching our changes in vector with fluid precision. The Necron craft recognized the threat and pushed harder toward the heart of the Veiled Nebula, where warp storms made conventional travel suicidal. But the Eldar did not travel conventionally. Their vessels seemed to skip through real space like a stone across water, appearing and vanishing in bursts of prismatic light. They were gaining. My fragmented consciousness ran options. The Necron craft was not designed for combat. Observation, infiltration, survival through secrecy. Against an Eldar warship, it stood no chance, but it had other defenses. Without any conscious command from me, the hull reconfigured. Crystalline structures blossomed across its surface, catching light and bending it around us. To an outside observer, we would shimmer, blur, fade, our position uncertain, our outline wrong, our presence reduced to a question mark. A crude form of Necron phase technology, not true dimensional shifting, but enough to scramble readings and spawn false returns. The Eldar were not deceived. Their pursuit continued. Slower now, more cautious. They fired no weapons, made no overtly hostile move beyond relentless tracking. They were curious, intrigued by a lone Necron vessel fleeing an awakening battle, behaving in ways that did not match known Necron protocols. And then I felt it, a delicate pressure against my mind. A psychic probe, gentle, persistent, searching not for my flesh, but for whatever consciousness now guided the craft I rode inside. The Eldar weren't trying to destroy me. They were trying to touch me, to speak, to slip past the outer walls of my mind and see what lived inside. I recoiled on instinct, and the Necron technology answered my fear. The filaments threaded through my body pulsed with cold power, raising a silent barrier around my thoughts. The pressure withdrew, but I felt the Eldar vessel's surprise, sharp as a needle. They had expected Necron, or human, not this. Not something mixed, an interface of flesh and living metal, a mind that didn't fit any clean category. Their pursuit tightened. Whatever I had become mattered to them, threat, opportunity, anomaly. The Necron craft pushed harder, driving toward the heart of the nebula where reality began to fray. Ahead, the void twisted into a churning boundary of color and distortion. The edge of a warp storm where the Imperium bled into real space in a chaotic, hungry maelstrom. No navigator would guide an Imperial ship through that. No Geller field was meant to endure forces like these. But the Necron vessel wasn't warp-capable in the way humans understood it, and it wasn't dependent on the protections organic life required. It could skim the storm's edge, using gravitational shear and electromagnetic interference as cover. The Eldar ship hesitated at the boundary. Even they had limits. I felt one last psychic contact. Stronger now, focused, not a strike, but a message pressed into my consciousness as concepts rather than words. Abomination. Dangerous. Return. And then an image, startlingly clear. A world of crystal spires and living ships, minds that spanned millennia, bodies engineered toward an alien perfection. A sanctuary, or a cage dressed as mercy. They were offering surrender. Come with them to one of their hidden worlds, and they would study what I was. Perhaps they could separate me from the Necron integration, if separation was still possible. For a heartbeat I wavered. The Eldar were enemies of mankind. Yes, but also enemies of Necrons and the powers of chaos. Their civilization, diminished though it was, spoke of balance and structure. Perhaps they could undo what was happening to me. Perhaps they could return me to something like humanity, but the Necron vessel had a mission, and now so did I. To move beyond Imperial authority, beyond Necron dominion. To observe, to learn, to find what lay in the blind spaces where empires didn't bother to look. I rejected the Eldar's offer. I pushed their presence away with a strength I hadn't possessed before. Strength born from the same integration that terrified me. The ship responded immediately, surging forward into the storm's boundary where continent-wide discharges arced through the void like the snapping of gods. The Eldar did not follow. Their vessel banked away, withdrawing to whatever hidden purpose had brought them here in the first place. But I knew they would report what they'd seen. Another player had noticed me. I was no longer just a deserter fleeing Imperial justice. I was something unique, something that multiple powers might consider worth hunting, worth studying, worth erasing. The warp storm swallowed us. Outside the hull, reality dissolved into churning madness. Inside, protected by technology built to function without regard for the warp's cruelty, I drifted into a state between waking and hibernation as the vessel pressed onward to destinations unknown. My last coherent thought was bitterly simple. I had escaped the Imperium's reach, and in doing so, I had placed myself beyond any hope of returning to humanity. I had become the kind of thing the Imperium burned worlds to prevent. Time loses meaning in the void between stars, doubly so inside a warp storm where reality becomes fluid and unreliable. I can't say how long the Necron vessel carried me through that maelstrom. Days, perhaps. Years. My consciousness fractured further during the passage. The human part of me retreated into dream and memory while the hybrid intelligence, born where my mind met the ship's systems, held our course. I remember only flashes. Vast presences moving in the depths, attention sliding over us without recognition. The Necron technology rendered us beneath their notice. For that, at least, I was grateful. When awareness returned in full, we had emerged into real space far from any Imperial chart I had ever read. The storm was behind us, a distant smear of impossible color against the black. Ahead lay an unmarked system, a red dwarf star, and 3 small planets. The vessel analyzed them with methodical patience. The inner world was a molten furnace too close to its sun. The outermost was a frozen waste of methane ice. But the middle planet, atmosphere within human tolerance. Liquid water, energy signatures that suggested technology. We approached cautiously, the ship responding to my unspoken directive to remain unseen. As we entered orbit, the world below resolved into stark contradiction. Deep blue oceans dominated the surface. One large equatorial continent spread out in green forests and golden plains, and cities, human cities. Their geometry carried the unmistakable fingerprint of imperial colonial design. But something was wrong. The energy signatures were too weak, too scattered. No orbital defenses challenged our approach. No Vox traffic filled the bands an imperial world usually choked with noise. The ship estimated roughly 12,000 human life signs across the entire planet. For a world with infrastructure like this, the number was impossible. I directed the vessel down near one of the larger settlements, a city built where a river met the sea. As we broke cloud cover, the truth became plain. The city was mostly ruin. Buildings stood hollow, streets swallowed by native vegetation. Only the center showed signs of maintenance, one stubborn pocket of life amid decay. We touched down on what had once been a landing field, now reclaimed by grass and flowering plants I didn't recognize. The ship extended sensory tendrils into the air, tasting the atmosphere and searching for threats. None immediate. It began to form an exit. Then I sensed motion. Humans, approaching with purpose. They came in vehicles of imperial manufacture, ancient, repaired, modified with non-standard components. 23 individuals in total, armed with laser guns and more primitive projectile weapons. They formed a perimeter at a cautious distance. One figure stepped forward. A leader, male, elderly by appearance. Augmetic replacements visible at his left eye and right arm. He wore a patchwork of what might once have been Imperial Guard armor, repaired and reworked over decades. He raised a Vox amplifier. "Identify yourself and state your purpose," he called. His high Gothic was heavily accented but recognizable. "This world is under the protection of the free colony of Hadrian's Rest." The ship translated automatically, though I didn't need it. My mind raced. Humans, isolated from the Imperium, yet still clinging to its language and relic technology. They might offer information, resources, maybe even a path toward undoing what was slowly consuming my humanity. But how would they react to what I had become? I was neither fully human nor Necron now. Something between. The metal filaments had spread beneath my skin into a hidden network that caught the light faintly at certain angles. And my eyes. I didn't need a mirror to know what burned in them now. I decided knowledge was worth the risk. I willed the ship open. Living metal flowed aside, forming an entrance. I stepped down onto the soil of Hadrian's Rest. The first planetary ground I'd felt beneath my feet since the tomb world. The reaction was immediate. Weapons snapped up. Shouts of alarm, sharp intake of breath. The leader took an involuntary step back, his augmetic eye whirring as it adjusted focus. "Throne of Terror," he murmured. "What are you?" "My name is Ralph Vex," I said. My voice sounded strange after so long speaking only through systems and silence. I was once a guardsman of the Imperium. Now, I'm something else. "Necron," someone spat from behind the line. "Metal abomination." "Not entirely," I replied, keeping my hands visible and my posture non-threatening. "I'm still partly human, still myself. The ship and I are connected, but I retain my own will." The leader studied me with his organic eye narrowed, while his augmetic one continued to scan. "I am Marshal Hadrian Kell," he said at last, voice like rusted iron. "Founder of this colony. I've seen enough horrors to know when something is not what it claims." You say you seek something. What? Information, I said. Nothing more. This world, your colony. How did you come to be here? Beyond Imperial borders. A bitter laugh escaped him. Beyond borders? Boy, we were once the proud center of an Imperial subsector. Hadrian's Rest was a thriving agri-world with 16 billion loyal citizens. I glanced at the ruins around us, the empty streets, the swallowed buildings. What happened? The Imperium happened, he said, flat and hard. 97 years ago, the subsector was written off. Administrative error, resource reallocation, strategic withdrawal. The words change depending on which record you find. His gaze swept the broken skyline. The result didn't. Supply ships stopped. Astropathic contact ceased. The administratum erased us from their ledgers. Several colonists nodded grimly. This was not news to them. It was the wound their society had grown around. Most worlds in the subsector died quickly, Kell continued. Without Imperial supply lines, without Navy protection, they were prey, raiders, Xenos, worse. We survived because we were self-sufficient, distant from the usual routes, and because some of us remembered how to live without the Imperium's leash. You rebuilt, I observed, looking toward the maintained district. We survived, he corrected. 12,000 of us from 16 billion. We abandoned the other cities, consolidated, learned to make do. Every piece of technology we can't manufacture becomes more precious every year. Every skilled worker who dies takes irreplaceable knowledge with them. I processed it, matching it against everything I knew of Imperial bureaucracy. It fit too well. In a galaxy-spanning machine, entire sectors could be misplaced, misfiled, sacrificed to expediency. Correcting the error cost more than the lives it had doomed. And you never tried to re-establish contact? I asked. Kell's expression darkened. 3 times we sent ships back toward Imperial space. The first returned with news the sector had been quarantined, suspected warp contamination. Any approaching vessel was destroyed on sight. The second never returned. The third found only dead worlds and debris fields where our neighbors had been. He gestured at the armed ring around us. So we chose. Better to live free on a dying world than beg for scraps at the Emperor's table. Better to face extinction on our own terms than be sacrificed for administrative convenience. His words hit something in me, echoing my own reasons for desertion. The same callous calculus, different scale, same cruelty. You said you seek information, Kell went on, tone slightly less hostile now, more wary. What kind of information could a human Necron thing want from us? I chose honesty, because lies felt useless here. I seek a way back to humanity, I said, and a place beyond both Imperial and Xenos, reach where I might live out whatever remains of me. Silence followed. Kell exchanged looks with his lieutenants. A conversation passed without words. Whatever you were, he said finally, you are something else now, something dangerous, something that could draw attention we cannot survive if the wrong eyes are watching. He was right. The Eldar had already noticed me. The Necrons would seek to reclaim their technology, and the Imperium would burn this world to ash the moment they learned it harbored anything like me. I won't stay long, I promised. Only long enough to learn whether separation is possible, and where I might go afterward. More silent glances. Then Kell nodded once, sharp and decisive. You will remain under guard while we consult our tech priest. If anyone can make sense of your condition, it's Magos Dawn. His voice hardened again. But be warned, at the first sign you pose a threat to this colony, we will destroy you by any means necessary. I inclined my head. What choice did I have? 4 soldiers approached carefully, weapons trained on me, and escorted me toward the inhabited core. Others moved to establish a perimeter around the Necron vessel. I could still feel the ship, its systems a quiet presence at the edge of my mind, but I made no attempt to awaken it. Cooperation was survival. As we walked through the ruins, I saw how the colony endured. Gardens planted in plazas that had once been decorative. buildings dismantled to reinforce others, windmills and water wheels turning where advanced systems had failed long ago. Life stitched together from salvage and stubborn discipline. The inhabited zone at the center was a different world. Maintained streets, purposeful movement, people carrying tools and goods, tending crops, repairing machinery. Children played under watchful eyes, functioning, fragile. They brought me to a former administrative building repurposed as governance. Inside, parchment replaced data slates. Mechanical calculators stood where cogitators should have been. We descended to a lower level, and there I met their tech priest. Magos Dawn bore little resemblance to the Mechanicus priests I'd known in the Guard. His red robes were faded and patched. His augmetics were clearly salvaged, repaired, and repaired again. Only 3 mechadendrites extended from his back, and even they moved with slight irregularities that spoke of constant maintenance. His face remained mostly human, eyes replaced, portions of jaw reinforced by machinery. He looked up from a workbench of disassembled components as we entered, and his augmetic gaze locked on to me with immediate intensity. "Omnissiah preserve us," he whispered, setting down his tools and approaching slowly. "What manner of tech heresy is this?" "That's why we brought him," Kel said. "Determine what he is. Determine if he's a threat." The Magos circled me, mechadendrites extending to scan without touching. "The necrodermis integration with human tissue," he muttered, awe and revulsion competing in his tone. "Impossible. The metal should reject the flesh. Consume it, yet it coexists, symbiotic rather than parasitic." He addressed me directly. "How was this accomplished? What forge world, what tech heretic created such an abomination?" "It wasn't human design," I said. "I was captured by Necrons. The vessel integrated with me when I used it to escape. I didn't choose this." "Fascinating," he murmured, interest flaring. "A spontaneous integration. The Necron system adapted, preserved your organic components rather than replacing them. Perhaps it recognized the value of human cognitive flexibility compared to rigid Necron command protocols." He turned to Kel. "I must study this further, under controlled conditions." "The implications," Kel's expression tightened. "I did not bring him here for your research. I need to know if he's a threat." The Magos paused, then answered with the automatic certainty of his creed. "All knowledge is worth risk." Then, more practically, "I detect no immediate danger. The Necron components appear dormant, responsive only to his conscious direction. I find no evidence of external control protocols or autonomous functions that override his will." He wasn't entirely right. The ship was still there, quiet in my mind. And certain protocols had already merged into the way I thought. But I didn't correct him. Not yet. Better, I decided, to seem less integrated, less alien than I truly was. "Can it be reversed?" I asked. "Can the Necron technology be removed without killing me?" Magos Dawn paused. His mechadendrites retracted a fraction as he considered. "Unknown," he said at last. "The integration appears comprehensive. The filaments have bonded with your nervous system, your organs, even penetrated your cellular structures. Separation might be possible with sufficiently advanced technology, but..." He gestured around at his makeshift workshop. "We barely maintain what Imperial machines we still possess. Nothing here approaches the sophistication required." Hope dimmed. I had expected that answer, but hearing it spoken aloud still weighed like stone. If the Mechanicus at the height of its power would struggle with such an operation, what chance did this isolated, half-starved colony have? "There may be another option," the Magos added quietly. "Rumors persist of a xenotech trading post at the edge of the Halo Stars. A neutral ground where rogue traders, exiled tech priests, and even Xenos merchants exchange technology and services beyond Imperial law. If anywhere in this region might possess the knowledge or tools to address your condition, it would be there." The Marshal made a sound of disgust. "The Nexus," he said. You would send him to that den of heretics and Xenos collaborators? I merely provide information, Dawn replied, tone smooth. What he does with it is his concern, not ours. I seized on the fragile thread of possibility. This nexus? I asked. How would I find it? The Marshal and the Magos exchanged a long look. There was tension there, philosophical and practical. The colony maintains minimal contact with the nexus, Kell admitted at last. Out of necessity. Certain components we cannot fabricate must be acquired through trade. Navigational coordinates exist, but the route is treacherous. Warp storms. Raiders. Worse. My vessel can navigate such hazards, I said, confidence rising from the Necron ship's quiet presence in my mind. The Marshal's expression hardened. And there lies our problem. You speak of that Xenos craft as if it were a limb of your own body. How can we trust you haven't been subverted entirely? That the human you claim to be still exists at all? It was a fair question. One I'd been asking myself more and more. How much of Ralva Vex remains? I thought. How much is something else now? I cannot prove what remains of my humanity, I said finally. I can only act according to what I still believe is right. I don't wish to harm your colony. I want only to find a way back to what I was, if such a path exists. Or to complete your transformation if it does not. The Magos observed, not accusing, merely curious. I had no answer. The thought had haunted me through the warp storm. If humanity is forever beyond my reach, what then? Embrace the cold immortality of the Necrons, become a hybrid thing unique in the galaxy, or find a way to end an existence too twisted to bear. I believe his intention is genuine, Magos Dawn said at last, addressing the Marshal. His emotional responses remain human despite the physical changes. I recommend providing coordinates to the Nexus. Remove the problem from our world and give him a chance to seek his own solution. Kell studied me, his augmetic eye whirring softly. Very well, but not immediately. You will remain under observation for 3 days. If no hostile action occurs and you make no attempt to communicate with your vessel, we will give you what you seek. I nodded. 3 days meant little after everything I'd already endured. And it would give me time to learn more about these people who clung to life at the edge of oblivion. They gave me quarters in a repurposed storage room. Sparse, but adequate. Guards remained outside at all times. Magos Dawn visited often, his curiosity far outweighing any doctrinal horror at my existence. The Imperium's reach is not infinite, he told me during one examination, mechadendrites picking delicately at the filaments visible beneath my skin. But its memory is long. Even after abandoning this subsector, Imperial vessels occasionally pass through. Rogue traders, explorator fleets, once an inquisitorial ship. It scanned the system, then departed. They know you're here, I asked. Perhaps. Or perhaps we are just another forgotten colony of no strategic value, not worth the resources required to reintegrate. He gave a harsh, mechanical chuckle. The Administratum's calculus is cold. 12,000 souls barely register against the trillions under Imperial rule. Yet you maintain Imperial technology and traditions, I said, even after being abandoned. What alternative do we have? He replied. Revert to pre-industrial barbarism, embrace Xenos technology and invite extermination for tech heresy. No, we walk the narrow path, preserving what we can of human civilization while accepting that we stand outside the Imperium's protection. There was a grim wisdom in that, an acceptance of reality without surrendering entirely to it. Perhaps there was a lesson for me in that balance. On the 3rd day, the Marshal summoned me to the roof of the administration building. From there, we could see the inhabited core of the city and the broken ruins beyond. My Necron vessel was still visible as a dark crescent on the distant landing field. Your ship has remained dormant, as you promised, Kell said. You've made no attempt to reach it. The Magos believes your intentions are genuine, though he'd rather keep you here as a specimen forever. He handed me a data slate, ancient, carefully maintained. These are the coordinates for the Nexus. The route passes near 2 warp storms and through a region prowled by orc raiders. Proceed with caution. I accepted the slate and scanned the navigational data. The Nexus sat at the intersection of rarely traveled warp routes, precisely positioned where overlapping dangers made Imperial enforcement difficult, but travel still possible. A perfect place for illicit trade and forbidden knowledge. "Thank you," I said, meeting his gaze. "Your colony has shown unexpected hospitality to something like me." "Not hospitality," he corrected. "Pragmatism. You are a potential threat and a potential source of knowledge. By sending you elsewhere, we reduce one and preserve the other." He looked out over his small, stubborn world. "We survive by making difficult choices," he said. "By accepting that sometimes there are no good options, only those that ruin us less." Again, his words echoed my own path away from the Imperium. "One last thing," he added, still watching the horizon. "The Magos believes your integration is progressing, not static. That the balance between human and machine will eventually shift irreversibly toward the latter. I'd felt it during my short stay. Heightened senses. Less need for sleep or food. A deeper awareness of the Necron vessel even at a distance. If you find no solution at the Nexus," Kel said, "do not come back here. This colony survives by being unremarkable, unworthy of notice from greater powers. What you are becoming would bring exactly the attention we cannot afford." "I understand," I said. "I won't endanger what you've built." He turned back to me, expression grave. "Good hunting, Ralph Vex, or whatever name you'll bear when your transformation is complete." I left that same day, walking alone to the landing field where my vessel waited. No escort shadowed me. Whether that was trust or simple realism about their ability to stop me, I couldn't say. The hull opened as I approached, the metal cradle flowing into shape to receive me. The connection, dampened during my stay, surged back to full strength as I lay down. Information flooded in. The ship had not been as dormant as they believed. Its passive sensors had quietly mapped the colony's defenses, surveyed their infrastructure, gauged their capabilities in meticulous detail. I could have taken whatever I wished. Supplies, tech, lives. If the Necron protocols had fully ruled me, the colony would have been nothing more than another resource to strip. But what remained of Ralph Vex would not allow it. These people, abandoned by the Imperium they once served, were too close to what I had become, unwanted remnants surviving in the cracks of an uncaring galaxy. The ship rose from Hadrian's Rest and climbed toward the void. I didn't look back. My path lay ahead, toward the Nexus and whatever answer waited there. Once clear of the gravity well, I set our course according to the Marshal's data. The journey would be long, threading between warp storms and predatory factions, but the vessel's stealth was considerable, or so I believed. Less than a day into the voyage, a proximity alert shattered the illusion of safety. A vessel had appeared ahead of us, as if from nothing. Its configuration matched nothing known to Imperial archives or to the Necron vessel's memory. It resembled a massive arrowhead forged from dark crystal, its surface reflecting starlight in hypnotic shifting patterns. No visible engines, no weapon mounts, yet it moved with deliberate precision to block our course. I initiated evasive maneuvers. The crystal ship mirrored them exactly, maintaining its position directly ahead. It did not fire, did not close. It simply refused to let us pass. A communication signal registered on the ship's systems. Not Vox, not psychic in the Eldar sense. Something else. A pattern of energy pulses targeted specifically at the interface between my organic brain and the Necron integration. Against my better judgment, I allowed the contact. The vessel translated the pattern into concepts my mind could grasp. Abomination. Impossibility, convergence of opposing paths. Curiosity rolled behind the message. Clinical, intense, disturbingly similar to Magos Dawn's scientific interest. I answered with my own concepts, seeking knowledge, seeking reversal, seeking sanctuary. A pause. Then new impressions flowed in. Ancient race, observers of cycles, collectors of anomalies. The crystal ship adjusted position, no longer blocking us, instead drifting slightly aside and ahead. An escort rather than a barrier. Guiding. We seek understanding of your nature, the message continued. You seek understanding of your condition, convergence of interests. I hesitated. The Necrons had nearly remade me. The Eldar had tried to capture me. Everything in my experience screamed caution, but the Nexus remained my only lead. If these beings knew of it, or knew more, I could not afford to turn away. I allowed the escort. We traveled together for what felt like days, though time had grown slippery for me. At last, a system appeared ahead. Not the Nexus coordinates, but somewhere else entirely. A binary star orbited not by planets, but by a web of artificial structures. Vast crystalline habitats, each unique in form, linked by arcs of energy and corridors of light. The Arrowhead ship led us to one of the smaller habitats at the system's edge. A docking bay opened, sized to accept the Necron vessel. Energy fields, reminiscent of those on the Tomb World, held atmosphere while allowing our passage. We settled into place. The crystalline floor flowed to create supports that matched the vessel's lines exactly. Déjà vu washed over me. Another unknown dock, another decision to leave the relative safety of my ship and trust strangers. Once again, knowledge outweighed fear. At my command, the hull parted. I stepped out into the crystal habitat. The air was breathable, but subtly wrong, sweet, laced with trace elements unfamiliar to standard human environments. Not enough to harm me, but enough to remind me that this place was not built for humans. They were waiting. 3 figures stood a respectful distance from the ship. Humanoid in outline, but clearly not human. Their bodies were made of the same crystalline substance as their vessel and station, semi-transparent and refracting light in intricate shifting patterns. They had no faces as I understood them, yet their attention was unmistakably focused on me. Welcome, convergence entity. The voice arrived as direct conceptual transmission, cleanly interpreted by my hybrid mind. We are the crystalline magi, observers of galactic cycles. I had never heard of them, not in Imperial doctrine, nor in the fragmented awareness I carried from Necron systems. They existed outside the familiar war, beyond the constant slaughter between organics, chaos, and the dynasties of living metal. What do you want with me? I asked, wordless thought shaped and projected. You represent an unprecedented convergence. The central figure replied. Necron phase metal integrated with human consciousness. 2 opposed evolutionary paths merging. This has not occurred in any previous cycle. Previous cycle? I echoed. The galaxy dies and is reborn. Another explained. Organic life rises, falls, transforms. Patterns repeat with variation. We observe, record, preserve key specimens and knowledge between cycles. The claim was staggering, an existence that spanned not just ages, but iterations of the galaxy itself. You said I seek reversal, I pressed. A return to human form. Can you help me? This may not be possible. The third answered. The integration approaches completion. Soon, a new state of being will emerge. Neither human nor Necron, but something unprecedented. Your technology, your knowledge, must surpass anything at the Nexus, I insisted. If anyone can undo what's happening to me, it should be you. They conferred in a rapid exchange of energy patterns. I could sense it, but not decode it. We do not intervene directly. The central being said at last. But we recognize the value of your convergence. We propose exchange. Allow us to study the integration. Permit us to record the emergence of this new state. In return, we provide knowledge. Options. What kind of options? I asked. 3 paths lie before you, it replied. First, continuation. You proceed as you are. The integration completes at its current pace. You emerge as a unique hybrid entity, exceeding both human and Necron limitations. Second, acceleration. You hasten full transformation, abandon remaining organic components, and ascend to a new form of Necron existence while retaining human cognitive patterns. Third, separation. Painful, partial, imperfect. You return to an approximate human form, permanently altered, with reduced lifespan. The third path was what I had clung to since my escape. Any chance, no matter the cost, to be human again. Yet standing here, before beings who had watched galaxies recycle themselves, the Imperium's insistence that the human form was sacred suddenly felt small, parochial, a creed for one frightened species in a cosmos that had no interest in its dogma. "Show me," I said. "Show me what each path would mean." The crystalline chamber shifted. Its walls turned transparent, revealing 3 adjoining spaces beyond. In each, a version of myself existed, an embodied possibility. In the first chamber, I saw a figure that still resembled a man in outline. Broad shoulders, human proportions, but the Necron technology no longer hid beneath the skin. It wrapped the body in an exoskeleton of living metal, plates and segments flowing and flexing with every movement, emerald light pulsing faintly in the lines between. The first figure in the vision moved with inhuman grace, fluid, effortless. It shifted energy fields with thought alone, interfacing with machines of a dozen different origins as easily as breathing. It still looked vaguely like me, but wrapped in living metal, a seamless fusion of human will and Necron capability. In the second vision, humanity had almost vanished. A full Necron body, skeletal, imposing, stood where I should have been. Yet its stance, the tilt of its head, the way it moved, all of it betrayed the ghost of Ralph Vex. The green fire in its eyes held memory, understanding, and individual depth that no rank-and-file Necron warrior could claim. It examined human relics with something close to reverence. No true Necron would do that. In the third vision, I saw myself as I had been before all of this. A human man in simple clothes, no armor, no exoskeleton, just Ralph Vex. But the longer I watched, the more the cracks showed. Patches of skin gleamed with a metallic sheen. My eyes flickered green from time to time. Movements stuttered, interrupted by spasms of pain. That version of me was dying slowly. The separated Necron technology leaving behind damage that could never fully heal. "These are not predictions," one of the crystalline beings said. "Only modeled possibilities based on what we know. The true outcome of any path depends on many variables. Your will, the methods used, the circumstances of your life." I turned away from the 3 versions of myself, mind churning. None of the paths led back to who I had been. The Ralph Vex who deserted on Acrelius IV died the moment he turned his back on the Imperium's certainties. And that death was sealed in the tomb world when alien metal threaded itself through his nerves. "What would you choose?" I asked them, "if you were me?" "We do not choose for others," the Central Magus replied. "We observe. We record. The value lies in the diversity of paths, in the unique pattern each consciousness carves through existence." A non-answer, perhaps, or the only honest one they could give. "How long would this study of me take?" I asked. "Time flows differently within our habitats," another explained. "What will feel to us like years of observation will be only days for you. When we finish, we will give you what you need to follow whichever path you choose and transport you to the destination you desire." It was, on the surface, generous. "And if I refuse? Then we return you to your previous course," the central figure said simply. "We do not compel. We offer knowledge in exchange for knowledge." I weighed my choices. The Nexus might hold answers, but its technology and understanding would be a candle next to the star the crystalline Magi had already shown me. Their perspective reached across entire galactic cycles. No human, No Necron could match that. Yet their detachment unsettled me. To stand so far above history that you only watched it. What did that do to a mind? What did it cost in empathy? And in that moment, I realized what I feared most. It wasn't the metal under my skin. It wasn't the green light in my eyes. It was losing the human view of the world, empathy, moral judgment, the ability to see individual lives as something more than statistics. The Imperium had tried to crush that out of me with doctrine and atrocity. The Necron integration threatened to replace it with cold, endless perspective. What I needed to protect wasn't just my body. It was my capacity to care. I accept, I told them. Study me, but I want more than technical instructions. I want to understand what each path truly means. For my mind, my identity, my soul, if such a thing exists. The central figure inclined its crystalline head. A wise request. Understanding is the foundation of real choice. We will share what we know of consciousness in its many forms. The rest is yours to decide. So began my time among the crystalline magi, a period that felt outside normal space and time. They examined the integration of Necron phase metal with my biology in mind. I, in turn, studied them and the staggering archive they'd accumulated across multiple cycles of galactic history. I learned of species that had risen and vanished long before humanity crawled out of its cradle. Of devices even Necrons would not fully comprehend. Of philosophies that would have gotten any Imperial scholar burned for mere attempting to describe them. Most important of all, I learned about consciousness. The Magi had charted mind states across 1 trillion lives and forms. Flesh, machine, hybrid, energy, things that barely qualified as individuals at all. They understood how consciousness adapts to a new substrate. What remains, what shifts, what breaks. What you call your soul, one explained while mapping the interface between my brain and the Necron filaments, is neither purely physical nor independent of matter. It is a pattern, an organized process of information and experience that creates continuity of self. Does that pattern survive when the body changes completely? I asked. It can, the Magus replied, but the pattern evolves with its new substrate. A mind in metal does not experience as a mind in flesh. Priorities change. Perception changes. Whether you call that survival or replacement is a question of definition, not physics. The philosophical debates went on alongside the examinations. They were meticulous, but never cruel. To them, I was not a monstrosity, nor just a specimen. I was a new pattern, one worth understanding. Eventually, they honored their promise. They laid out detailed information for all 3 paths. Requirements, likely physical outcomes, psychological shifts, even existential implications. Then they added a 4th. Stasis, they said. We could preserve you in crystalline suspension, unchanged, until some future cycle offers better options. I refused instantly. Whatever I was going to become, I would face it awake, not as a fossil waiting for someone else's age. In the end, the choice crystallized into a question. What makes Ralph Vex, Ralph Vex? The specific arrangement of carbon and water I'd been born with? The memories I carried? The moral choices I made? Some combination of all 3. I chose a modified version of the first path. Not complete, balanced fusion in which human and Necron would share equal weight. Too great the risk of cold logic creeping in at the edges. Instead, a controlled integration. The Necron technology would remain. Its abilities would be mine to call upon. But it would be subordinate to my human consciousness, bound by constraints and safeguards designed to hold the line around my sense of self. Outwardly, I would remain mostly human, though visibly altered in ways no disguise could fully hide. The procedure was intricate beyond anything I'd seen. The Magi adjusted the interface like a concertmaster tuning a living instrument. They set hard boundaries for how far the integration could ever progress. They built safeguards against any creeping takeover by Necron protocols. When it was done, I stood before them and looked down at my hands. My skin carried fine traceries of silver where the filaments ran close to the surface, like veins of metal beneath flesh. When I reached for certain capabilities, I could feel my eyes flare faintly with green. But inside I still felt like me. My emotions were intact. My capacity for empathy, for doubt, for guilt and hope and stubbornness, all still there. My memories remained mine, not data in a vault. The integration is now stable, the Central Magus said. It will not progress further nor recede on its own. The Necron capabilities remain accessible, but cannot dominate your consciousness. What am I now? I asked, flexing fingers that were flesh and metal in equal truth. You are the first of your kind, came the reply. Neither human by imperial dogma, nor Necron by their ancient standards. A new pattern occupying a hybrid substrate. What you become from now on is defined by your choices, not by your composition. They gave me a small crystal, a device that would let me contact them if I ever needed to. Then they offered transport anywhere within their vast reach. For a moment, I considered continuing to the Nexus as planned. But by then, the Nexus had nothing left to offer me that the Magi had not already surpassed. I could not return to Imperial space. I remained in their eyes, a deserter and an abomination. The Inquisition would not care that my humanity felt intact. They'd test it by fire. I could not go back to Hadrian's Rest. Marshal Kell had made that clear, and he was right. My presence would only attract doom to their fragile refuge. There are others like you, one of the Magi said, sensing my uncertainty. Not identical, but beings who exist between categories. Exiles who endure beyond the reach of empires. Where would I find them? I asked. At the borders of reality, came the answer. Where the material galaxy brushes against other dimensions. Zones shunned by Imperium and Xenos alike for their hazards and anomalies. Places where the rules themselves are flexible. It was less a destination than a direction, but it was enough. I thanked the Magi and returned to my vessel. No longer a prison, no longer a parasite, but an extension of myself. Before I left, the Central Magus offered one last thought. Your journey began as an attempt to escape the Imperium, it said. Yet everyone you encountered demanded something from you. The Necrons, the Eldar, even us, with our request to study you. I nodded. There was no denying it. Perhaps true escape, the Magus continued, is not about fleeing the Imperium's physical reach, but transcending the binary thinking it embodies. Human or Xenos, loyal or heretic, pure or corrupted. You now exist as proof that such categories are insufficient. With those words lodged deep in my mind, I departed. The Necron ship closed around me, and this time there was no struggle for dominance. The integration between us held steady, balanced. I was not its master, not its prisoner. We were an extension of each other. I set our course toward those border regions where reality thins. Not with the frantic desperation that had driven me when I first fled Imperial space, but with something new, curiosity, a desire not just to escape, but to discover what might exist beyond the patterns that had defined the galaxy for so long. The Imperium would continue its endless crusades. Necron tomb worlds would rise. Chaos would corrupt. Orcs would bellow and burn. Eldar would scheme and mourn the ruins of their past. The great powers would keep grinding against each other as they always had. I would not belong to any of them. I would chart another path, between human and Xenos, between loyal and heretic, between pure and corrupt. Something new, something in between. What happens when you try to escape the Imperium? You learn that true escape requires more than distance. It demands you step outside the cages of thought the Imperium built for you. Those same cages its enemies reinforce in different colors. My name is Ralve Vex. I am not what I was. I am not yet what I will be. I am becoming, and the void between the stars is wide enough for one more wanderer in search of his own truth.